Hello, I get asked lots of questions about how to write chapters. So this piece deals with some fundamentals, if you like, that it's worth considering before you put pen to paper. So let's get stuck straight in and look at chapter structure. Chapter structure, in other words, how a chapter is put together. And there is a series of 3 videos about a technique called grab, tell, tease, which I would recommend looking at, and that complements what's in here, but this is a good place to get started. So please at least have a beginning, a middle and an end to your chapter. Some chapters just sort of start and run on until it looks like the writer ran out of steam. It's not difficult to put a bit of structure in. The opening paragraph can make such a difference to whether or not the reader reads on and the way they feel about what they're reading, and bringing things to some kind of end is also psychologically very beneficial to the reader. If you don't bother to do this, then don't be surprised if people don't bother to read what you've written, however good you might think the content is. So how can you go about that, and what sort of techniques can you use? I'm going to look at non-fiction and fiction. So let's look at non-fiction first. In the case of fiction and non-fiction, this is one place where things are very different. Well, there's an old saying, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And that applies not just to writing a chapter. Sometimes people say that should apply to a presentation or a lecture. And there is a lot of sense in that, because obviously, you set the context of what's going to be said and people set expectations. You then cover exactly what you said you were going to cover, so you stay on topic. And then it's always useful, particularly when you're dealing with facts and things, to just briefly summarize what's being said. People remember things much more if you do that. So in one sense, that's all very academically sound. There's just one problem. It can be very boring to go about things that way. So if you don't do something else in addition to that, you're probably going to produce something that's respectable, but not necessarily that readable. So let's look at the complementary thing for fiction now, and what you might call the fiction classic. Now, the fiction classic, as I've called it, is where first of all you set the scene and introduce the characters, and that enables somebody to see what the whole thing's about. And the classic stories do that, and people are familiar with reading that, so they're quite comfortable if you do that. Then usually what happens is you create some kind of event that kicks everything off. For this chapter, or in the first chapter for the whole book, there's some event that is significant. And then once that event happens, then you follow through what then happens as a result of that event, and the story unfolds, so to speak. And then, given that you're trying to break this up into chapters and not be one long thing, then somehow or other you come to a break point where some other thing happens, usually, that concludes that part of the overall story. Now, it does work as a narrative, and it's used quite a lot, but it may not engage your reader enough. I think in children's stories it probably works well, because children need help in understanding the context of things and so on. But it has certain merits, and don't want to tip the baby out with the bathwater, but it probably isn't enough. So let's move on and see what else we can say. Let's talk about the beginning. Now, I'm talking in terms of fiction and non-fiction in a sense now. Can you somehow grab attention? And can you create a question in the reader's mind? If you look at the other video on grab, tell, tease. You'll see there's more about that, but something to grab the reader's attention at the beginning does make a difference. And you know, in terms of the classic setup, you can still incorporate that into those classic forms. Second, the middle. Well, oh dear, 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 I so often see this. Often the middle of a chapter is just very one long monologue, one paragraph after another, with no variation, no peaks or troughs, and just grinds on. What makes such a difference is if it breaks down into some kind of well-formed parts. There is some inner structure to the middle of the chapter, and I think that middle structure appears more easily if what you're writing is more carefully planned rather than just sitting there and churning out whatever it is. Very gifted writers are able to do lots of these things without the planning, but planning really can make a huge difference, and even experienced writers will tell you their planning improved the quality of what they did. So try not to make the middle a monologue. That's the key point here. And then the end. Some chapters just fizzle out. They come to an end, not even an abrupt end sometimes. You know, you think, oh, well, that's it, is it? So if you have managed to create some kind of question early on, got some kind of engagement, you can at least bring some kind of resolution to it round about the end of the chapter, and you can do something perhaps to peep ahead to what's coming next. If you do that, it will make a massive difference. And as I've already mentioned, there is a technique called grab, tell, tease, which you can apply to give more weight and more punch to this particular approach. So if you found that useful, here's our website where you can get further assistance as an author. And I hope you found that useful. Nice blank screen there. That was a link. I hope you found that useful. If you did and you'd like to hear more, do think of clicking the bell button and subscribing so you'll then know what's coming up. If you liked what you saw, please click on like, and if you've got any questions, please post them below and I'll do my best to answer them in future. Thanks very much for listening, watching, and hope to have your company again before too long. Bye for now.